We have a lot to cover here in today's video. We have some big-time rumors regarding trades and other things around the NHL. With trade talk, we're looking at the Boston Bruins, the Vegas Golden Knights, Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators. Plus, could Canes forward Jesperi Kotkaniemi be facing a buyout? We'll discuss how that could benefit the team, how much money they could save, and I'll give you my thoughts on how likely that is. There's also another massive rumor that the Flyers might actually be able to get VGK Michkov coming to play for them as early as this fall for next season, when they thought it was going to be a couple of more years. We'll discuss the news and how that could work, plus the latest from the playoffs and other news around the league, including the Carolina Hurricanes locking up head coach Brind'Amour. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. First, let's recap Game 6 of the Oilers and Canucks. The Oilers won the game, forced Game 7. It was a fairly dominant win for the Edmonton Oilers on home ice. The Canucks really were limited to a lot of shots, 15 shots on goal total, especially in the first period. They only had a few shots. I really thought they kind of took their foot off the gas. I don't know if it was nerves. I'm not really sure what it was, but with Stuart Skinner coming back in, I would have thought that with the way Rick Tocchet prepared them and the way the team would have been kind of ready to go, that they would have been saying, let's pelt this guy with shots and get everything on net, because he's looked shaky at times. He's been pulled. His confidence probably isn't real good. Let's not let him get comfortable and get that confidence back. And they didn't do that. I was really shocked. Now, of course, the Edmonton Oilers on the other side had something to say about that. They had a better game defensively for sure, but still, I thought that the Canucks had a missed opportunity there to really get everything on net and to really test Skinner early, but they let him settle in, and from there, the Oilers slowly took over. The power play was good. McDavid and Nugent-Hopkins each had 3 points. Leon had a couple of assists, also had goals from Bouchard with the Bush bomb. Kane, Holloway had a beautiful goal. Almost looked like McDavid in the sense the way he cut in towards the net with that speed of his. And then Zach Hyman had a goal too. So certainly like a real solid game overall for the Oilers. Not a great game for the Canucks. Game 7, here we come, Monday night in Vancouver. Rick Tocchet did confirm as well that Thatcher Demko will not be making a miraculous return, that he's not going to be ready to play just yet. So certainly they'll stick with Shelovs, I'm sure. But the Vancouver Canucks also got some devastating news. The news just broke here a short time before I started to record in the last 45 minutes to an hour. But Game 7, the Vancouver Canucks are going to be without Brock Boeser, which is a massive blow. He has been so good for them, not only through the regular season, but one of the top playoff performers, not only on his team, but in the entire league through the 24 Stanley Cup playoffs. Apparently, he's dealing with some sort of a blood clotting issue. Now, we've seen other players deal with this in the past. It's not, I wouldn't call it common, but it's not like it's unheard of either. We've seen Freddie Anderson of the Hurricanes deal with this past year. I know a number of years ago, long time ago, Stamkos had that issue as well. That was, I want to say that was, geez, I don't even remember, 2017, 2018, I can't remember now. But it's something that can happen. There's a number of reasons and things that can cause it. We don't know exactly the whole scenario here with Brock. I just know that he's gone through a lot personally. He's been a heck of a performer this year, and I really feel terrible for him. And this is a big blow for the Canucks. Not only do I feel bad for him personally, but he has been such a key contributor to their offense that they are definitely going to miss him. He's the kind of guy you can't really replace. So they obviously will put somebody else in his spot because they have no choice, but it's just not going to be the same effect. But I'm sure the Canucks, they've been one of those teams all year. They'll face elimination for the first time. They will obviously have some adversity facing them, but they've been dealing with that all year, and I have no doubt it's still going to be a heck of a game and a close one, no matter what happens. So we'll see what happens in Game 7 and who will move on in the Western Conference Final to play the Dallas Stars. Some other news around the NHL. We got the word last night around the time the game was starting that Sasha Barkov is the Selke Trophy winner, and he won by quite a large margin as well. I believe Jordan Staal was the runner-up. They did release the ballots. Staal, I think, was second. Matthews was a distant third. Sam Reinhart was actually, I believe, in fourth with Anze Kopitar. So certainly a number of Panther top players there getting a lot of recognition in that sense. So not a huge surprise. Barkov won, and like I said, it wasn't really all that close. But certainly the other guys on the finalist ballot had good seasons too, but not compared to Barkov from that sense for the definition of this award. Other big news out of Carolina, they finally announced today they've got coach Brind'Amour signed, and it's a 5-year deal. So this is the second time in recent years that we've had to hear about the extension and the contract talks and just dragging on. And I know I had a bit of I don't know what you want to call it, debate or mild dispute with a Canes fan in the comment section when I referred to Tom Dundon as being a little bit on the cheap side, a little bit thrifty, if you will. And I still stand by that. I honestly, we've seen some tough negotiations in Carolina. They've had players, they don't overpay for anybody. Like Dundon does have that type of approach. And I'm not saying it's all bad. He's a good owner. He's brought great stability. But there's certain things that I think sometimes you do have to, in the case of Brind'Amour especially, he's been underpaid for so long that at some point you need to kind of throw him a little bit of a bone or bonus, if you will, and just be like, you know what? We're going to make sure you're well looked after now. Get a 5-year pact. No word on the exact compensation, but all of his assistant coaches were all also receiving multi-year extensions as well. So everything he seemed to want is in place. So I guess any of those rumors that have been out there about Brind'Amour going to other teams, which we never really thought were remotely serious, will die down. I know some people had him going to Seattle because he had previously at one point played with Ron Francis, but we don't have any reason to think Francis wanted to hire him. We don't have any reason to think he wanted to. And I'm not even sure that they like to have a tight relationship or anything of that nature. Just because they had some on-ice connections in the past doesn't mean that that was going to work out. But Brind'Amour had no intention of wanting to leave Carolina. Now, if things got bad to the point that it wasn't going to work out, then yeah, sure, he would have probably looked for work elsewhere because I think he really does love coaching. But at the same time, it's home for him. And he's been a part of that organization, as a player, as an assistant coach, and as a head coach for so long that he doesn't want to go. And it's nice to see him get looked after. So Brind'Amour gets rewarded with a 5-year pact. A couple of news and notes that came out of the Canes end of season media availability. Seth Jarvis revealed that since the 15th game of the season, he's been dealing with a shoulder injury where he had a torn labrum and rotator cuff injury. That is crazy. That he only missed one regular season game and no playoff games. That's crazy that he played through that. That's got to be intense pain. He was asked if he was going to need surgery. He said he didn't think so, but he's not a medical professional. Of course, Jarvis is pretty much, if you listen to him in his interviews, he's got quite a bit of personality and certainly a bit of a jokester. So I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine how he wouldn't need surgery, but again, I'm not a medical expert either. But for him to play through that is crazy. And then on top of that, in the first round against the Islanders, he suffered a broken finger. So, yeah, we all know players play through a ton of adversity, a ton of pain, ton of stuff. This is the ultimate, considering how long he would have done it. So crazy to think that as well. One other item regarding Carolina that we'll discuss here before we move on to another team is there's a lot of talk about the future of Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And to be completely honest, you got to think that Don Waddell and the leadership there in Carolina are having regrets on the offer sheet. And we know that Montreal, of course, and Marc Bergevin, did the offer sheet to Sebastian Aho. Aho did sign it. Of course, Carolina matched it. Aho said he never really wanted to be a Hab, but he knew that it would probably help him get his contract with Carolina faster and get it done. That they, hoped that they wanted to keep him, and it worked out that way. And you know darn well that it was type of a revenge factor. It really was. Now, Montreal's attempt at the Aho's offer sheet was poor at best. So it's not shocking that they did it. But essentially, again, this kind of goes back to what I had said about Dundon kind of having a bit of a reputation for being a little on the cheaper side, a little on the thriftier side of things, was that Montreal front-loaded that contract with a bigger salary and more signing bonuses. And they honestly didn't think they needed to do more than that because they didn't think as much as they would like the player that Dundon would want to pay out those bonuses and those, more the front-loaded money. So they thought with the structure alone they would get the player, and it didn't work out that way. And clearly, I don't think he was thrilled with it, but he did match it, and they did do it. And now here we are with Kotkaniemi as a revenge factor, and this is really backfiring big time. This contract is looking horrible, to be making just under $5 million a year on a long-term contract. He's got 6 years left now. He's still young enough that you can do a 1/3 buyout. And I know a guy like Dundon probably isn't overly fond of buyouts because you're paying somebody to not play for you. But listen to this. I'll show you the graphic here from Cap Friendly, which explains how the buyout would work. Essentially, in the remaining 6 years of the contract, they would save about $4 million a year. Like, their cap hit would go from like 4.8 down to 4, or just shy of 4. So they would get back almost $4 million in space. That would allow them to keep an extra player because, between Marty Necas and Jake Gensel, and they get assigned Seth Jarvis, and they have on the blue line, they've got Pesce and Chatfield and Shea, all UFA. Like, they've got a lot of guys. Teravainen, I think, is UFA. Like, there's a bunch of them, and they're going to have to, at least half of the UFAs are going to walk because they can't afford to keep them all. But this would allow them a little bit more flexibility to keep maybe one more than they thought they could before. So it would drop his cap hit from close to $5 million down to pretty much $4 million. And then on top of that, it does add 6 extra years because it's twice the amount of time. So instead of being on their books for 6 years, it would be 12. But the final 6 years that would come as a tack on to the original 6 would only have a cap hit of $835,000. So in 6 years from now, when that contract would be expiring, you'd have 6 more years. But think about how much the cap's going to go up in the next 6 years. I mean, that's going to seem like peanuts by then. Over the life of that contract, it would save them paying out $20 million. So they'd pay out basically the equivalent of just over $10 million over the next 12 years. So to me, it's a big cash savings. It's a huge salary cap advantage. I would be shocked if they don't do this. Now, unless they just don't want to admit defeat here and don't want to admit that it was a massive mistake, they got him on the offer sheet on a 1-year deal, which was a massive overpayment, and then they did a much lower long-term deal the year after. But it's still it's horrible. Like, this is not anywhere close to being good value for them. So I'll be shocked if they don't do it. So stay tuned. When we get through the playoffs, the buyout window will open I think it's either June 15th or 48 hours after the Stanley Cup is awarded. So Kotkaniemi will be a name to watch for sure. Now, as I mentioned, we get a huge rumor it's not out of Philadelphia, but it's regarding the Philadelphia Flyers. It's actually out of Russia, a Russian outlet, which is Sports Express, which is typically very reliable. They're very well connected. So because it's from them and a good source, I think there's something to this. But I'll show you a snippet here from the article. Essentially, it leads us to think that the Matvei Michkov contract in the KHL is about to be terminated, and that he will be able to join the Flyers this coming fall for the 24-25 season. Now, of course, he still has 2 years on that contract, so when they drafted him, they knew there was going to be a 3-year wait, and a lot of teams, I think, shied away from drafting him because they don't, 3 years to wait, then even then, is he going to come? A lot of uncertainty, and that Russian factor does shy some teams away, there's no doubt. But Danny Briere and the Flyers saw an opportunity that they feel like they could not pass it up. And they might be very happy they did. Because instead of waiting 3 years, it looks like they might only have to wait 1. So essentially, they're trying to legally get everything sorted out. Flyers media is reporting that they're still trying to confirm all this, that they don't know. They're not hearing much from the team. The team has got to be aware of this. There's no way they would not know. But of course, they're not really involved per se. We've seen a few social media posts from Michkov throughout since his off season so far, wearing Flyers gear, doing workouts and things like that. So clearly he's interested in coming. Essentially, the KHL team has to be bought out or paid out. Essentially, some sort of, I'm not really sure what the word would be to describe it, but it's like you're paying them off to let him out. They would want to retain his rights, though, for the KHL should he make a decision to return to the KHL during the life of that contract, so the next 2 years, or if he doesn't make the NHL club, that they could figure out Philadelphia loaning him back. So they're legally trying to sort through all that. But essentially, for the contract to be terminated, for him to sign his rookie contract with the Flyers, that KHL team is going to be looking for some money. Now, the Flyers can't pay that. That has to come from between Michkov, his agent. Like that's something they have to sort out. All the Flyers can do is give him his rookie contract with the maximum bonuses that they can add into it. So I don't know if this is going to happen or if it's not, but it sounds like, like the headline says that he's going to continue his hockey career in Philly. So it sounds promising, but time will tell. I'm not sure when we're going to get clarity on that, but Michkov may be coming to North America and joining the Flyers as early as this fall. It could be a real exciting move here for Philly to get him in the lineup, and might have to cut down that weight by 2/3, which is phenomenal. So we'll see where things go on that front. On the trade rumor front, lots of things I want to touch on here today. The Bruins had their locker cleanout day, spoke to the media. One of the main players that's been linked to trade talk has been goalie Linus Ullmark. So he obviously spoke today, expressed a lot of desire to finish out his contract and remain with the Bruins. Mentioned he'd like to go on a bit of a revenge tour. That's going to be very challenging for him to do. He also acknowledged the business side of sport and knows that it's not a given that he does stay, but he did say that he has a modified no trade. The teams that he puts on his list, he has them on that list for a reason, which he wasn't going to get into. But obviously, he said what's best for him and his family. And when they make these decisions for what teams to put on his list, it doesn't sound like he's overly willing to waive. If these teams are there, he's already thought about things and says, I won't go to these teams. So getting him to waive, if a team wants him that's on that list, sounds like it's going to be quite a job, if not impossible. That's just I can't say that for certain, but he made it sound that way. So we'll see. I mean, obviously they gotta sign Swayman. He needs a new deal, and he's certainly going to get a lucrative long-term deal. Being the much younger two of the goalies, not only the goalie of the future, but the goalie of the present. He played the most in the playoffs. Not to say that they couldn't possibly run it back next year. It is a possibility, but I think at this point the Bruins know that Ullmark is not going to be a Bruin beyond the completion of his contract, and if they let him get to free agency and walk, then there's no chance to get anything in return for him. If they trade him, while they can free up some cap space to do other things, because clearly the other parts of the roster need work, and they can get some other pieces to help them retool here and kind of see if they can get back in contention and stay relevant. So there's certainly lots of moving parts. It's hard to say. I know Dave Pagnona had a report out today talking about how the uncertainty around the future of Linus Ullmark, as well as Jake DeBrusk in Boston. So, with DeBrusk, he basically said that he understands, again, how they like to operate. He understands the business side of the game, but he was a bit disappointed that, an extension hadn't already been worked out. And generally, when you get players this late in the campaign, when it's not worked out, it doesn't always mean that they end up leaving, but it does mean that the team has reservations to sign an extension, and it's quite possible he could end up moving on. But again, not a given. The Bruins are certainly going to have a little bit more flexibility with the cap, but at the same time, you get $20 million, but by the time you extend Jeremy Swayman, you look after a few other contracts that need done, that money is going to be cut in half, and you're suddenly going to find yourself trying to upgrade a top 6 center, a top 4 defenseman, and you're like, oh, geez, we can't do it all, right? So money's going to go out. So it's just that simple. It's going to be tough. So whether or not they keep either of these guys will be very much a big challenge. And there's certainty, the future, I should say, is uncertain at best with Boston. But there'll be a couple of players to kind of monitor here down the stretch of the offseason. In Vegas, as I mentioned, big interest in retaining Jonathan Marchessault, but they don't really have the space to do that. They are going to, possibly have some LTIR flexibility next year. We don't know that for sure. Again, a goalie could be traded this year too between Thompson and Hill, most likely Thompson. But again, he doesn't come with a big contract. The feeling is that Shea Theodore in the back end is a player to watch. You could see guys like Whitecloud or Haig maybe be the guy that goes instead. Theodore has a bigger contract, better value. In that sense, a lot of people think, which I agree with, is that since they signed Noah Hannafin long term, that's going to open the door for Theodore's exit, if you will. I noticed Hannafin getting a lot of the opportunities in the playoffs that normally you'd see Theodore getting on the power play and such. So I kind of feel like they've brought in his replacement almost. So we'll see what happens. But Shea Theodore is a player that would get a ton of interest from a whole bunch of teams around the NHL. Terrific skater, great offensive instincts, getting a lot of experience, a lot of playoff experience now as well. He's got a Stanley Cup to his name. There's lots to like. Still on the younger side of his career here. So certainly watch his name out there as well. In Toronto, we've talked a lot about the big Ford, Tavares, Marner, a big move coming in that regard, or a goaltender maybe coming in to work with Joe Wall, but a name that is out there, according to Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period, is defenseman Timothy Liljegren. Of course, I do think Brad Treliving is going to do some surgery to that back end of the blue line for the Leafs. I know, looking at his history, he puts a major emphasis on the blue line, and not that the blue line was a huge problem for the Leafs in the playoffs. It wasn't. It was the ability to score 5-on-5. So obviously we expect a shakeup in the big four, most likely leading to a Marner trade. At least that's the general consensus out there. But guys like Liljegren and supporting members likely going to get moved. We know Brody's probably not returning. Belief is he's not going to be offered a new contract. So Liljegren's name being out there would be an opportunity to try to make some upgrades. So again, doesn't mean Liljegren's going to get moved for sure, but he's definitely a player that the Leafs have let known, according to enough insiders, that they're willing to talk about for the right deal. And of course, like I said, they want to make some other big upgrades though. So moving Marner would allow them to, hopefully they need to try to bring in another goalie. They want to spread out some better forwards. At the same time, rebuild the blue line. I think there's a lot that Brad Treliving would probably like to do, and it's going to be very challenging to do it all. So we will see. We'll have to see where that goes. But Liljegren's name is definitely out there. And when it comes to Ottawa, we've talked a lot about Chychrun, a bit about Brandstrom, but another name to watch is Matthew Joseph. He was heavy in the rumor mill last offseason, mainly because of his contract and the Sens needing to sign Shane Pinto, and the amount that Pinto was looking for was similar to Joseph's contract, so a lot of fans saw it as real simple. Move him, sign him, and we're done. And a lot of media and reporters that had inside access to knowing what they were up to kind of suggested that was a real possibility. It never did happen. Pinto got suspended. Now we're pretty much back in the same boat where Pinto needs a contract again. We don't know what it's going to be. He expressed desire to get it done quickly this time and not have it drag on. And we're still early in the offseason, so we're not at that point yet. But, if you're looking at Joseph's season and you look at the fact that he had a real good start, and everybody was like, oh, thank God we didn't trade Joseph. But then look at the second half. It was terrible. But it was also his deployment where he was he played mostly more in a third line role where he was getting more top six time early on, especially with the injury to Josh Norris and the suspension of Shane Pinto. They directly correlate, and there's no doubt there. So to me, it's not an absolute given Joseph does move. You could deploy him if you spread out your offense in the top three lines a little bit better. But at the same time, you need to give up something to bring in some other players. We know they need ideally another top six forward. We know that they need to bring in ideally a right shot top 4D. But at the same time, they have a guy like Chychrun who's a top 4 left shot D they can move. They have some other prospects and picks and things they can consider moving too. Like, it doesn't have to be, in and out, so to speak. But Joseph is a guy that's, according to Bruce Garriock in his latest article from the Ottawa Sun, that Brandstrom could go, Chychrun could go, but Joseph, again, after an inconsistent, year and a slow second half, would be a guy to consider. And I think his speed is something they really like and are reluctant to move. But if they bring in another forward, like I said, we've been talking a bit about maybe Nick Ehlers being a fit there. They'd have another speedy forward to kind of replace him with, and it might make that move a little bit easier. But we'll see where things go. It's going to be a busy time for all these teams, and we're still early enough in the offseason that the rumor mill's kind of busy. Lots of names are out there, but it's not hit its peak for really what's chugging along here. There's still a number of teams playing, which kind of slows down things from actually happening too. So we'll see where it goes. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.